First of all, happy Tu B'Shvat. We just began right here Tu B'Shvat. Of course, many of our Beshalach Shirim in the past have incorporated Tu B'Shvat. I'm not going to do it again, I don't think, unless we end up having a lot of extra time. So let's talk about Beshalach Part One. We know that we've had so far 3 parshiot on the Geulah. It's very clear what those elements are. So we began with Shmot, which was the description of the nature of Pekida and what Pekida does, the transition that is achieved by Pekida that occurs with every one of the processes of Geulah. And it is, in fact, Pekida in the very same sense that intercourse is Pekida. It defines conception, and that's it. And after that conception, then everything is put into motion, the embryo begins to develop, and then we move on with all the mistakes initially in the early immature stages, which ends with the Hatzelo Yitzhak Tamecha, and all of the issues that Moshe Rabbeinu raised at the beginning, and we'll see we're going to come back here to the second stage. The second stage was an unbelievably important transition to a new Shem Hashem, in which Kel Shekai becomes the Shem Hashem Monodatilan, which is an entirely new description on a conceptual level of a mission statement that includes 5 separate stages of Geulah, the 4 stages that we're used to, which are connected to the Abakosos, and then the 5th stage of the Vevesi, the Parshas Bikurim, and so on. All of those things incorporate also many, not simply concepts, but actual lessons and models in terms of paro, the nature of choice, the nature of tshuva. As the Rambam explains, all ingredients that are essential for the ultimate expression of choice and the beginning of da'at. Last week we had the 3rd level. The 3rd level was Bo. And Bo, we had the confluence between the 2 completely different aspects of Torah, one of which was the Bereshis Bar Lakir, B'Shvil Yisrael Shemei, and the ability for that to coalesce together with the other Torah, as Rashi says in the very first pasuk of Bereshis. That was the Chodesh Hazeh. Those 2 levels of understanding a history that is universal, and that obviously is not going to be something that's associated with a local rock that comes from a collision in a very rare kind of circumstance. It creates a very strange calendar that we have. That is the entire point of the transition to mitzvah and the way that life on this planet, Olam Hazeh, becomes so central, specifically after, for the first time, we have a model of Yisrael Shemei. Now it's possible to see how that and only that is what makes possible the meaning of creation of Chatchila, why mitzvah is important. These are all things we discussed before. I'm just reminding you of those 3 stages. Now the question is, what is this? What is this 4th parsha? Is it indeed a part 4 in the sense of it's being an actual different level that is required in terms of the Geulah? Because I don't know, it doesn't necessarily seem to be. It's an extremely complex parsha in the sense that its structure is very, very intimately arranged in a chiastic fashion. As we pointed out before, you've got 58 psukim going up, 58 psukim that undo exactly the stages that those 58 psukim do. Starting off with the Pen Yinachema and Birotam Milchama, which gives you that first recognition, and ending, of course, with Bilchama LaHashem Ba'amalek Midor Dor. So, but it's clearly there's that thematic aspect which we need to address, because it certainly seems to be just a small concern at the beginning and an eventual concern at the end. And yet here, if that is what brackets the parsha, it's got to be that it actually defines the parsha for it. That is difficult to see. And then the fact that it's very hard to find a theme in a parsha that creates itself and its antithesis, in terms of the way in which we have Emunah, and then we have the anti-Emunah, and we end up with Amalek, and for going from V'yaminu b'Hashem u'Moshe Avdo to, Hayesh Hashem b'Kabinu Yimayim, Lo Tenasu et Hashem, and so on and so forth. It's just extremely complex. And we suggested one time perhaps the idea itself is that it doesn't represent a fourth stage in Gula. Maybe it simply is the parsha of transition between what appeared to be the clarities at the time of the Yitzhak and the nature of the Sveikot and the issues that need to be examined before we get to Har Sinai, so that all of the elements of doubt that come up and all of the questions of how it is that we used language initially to be able to attain freedom, to attain awareness, and the way that we use language at the Seder Shabbat, and the way that the Zohar defines the entire Golas in Mitzrayim as being a Golas Hadibur, and of course of the issue of Shemot itself. So we examine here language reaches sort of an apex in Shira. That Shira raises its own questions about the nature of language and metaphor, like we have in the Micha Mocha, in the Hashem, the relationship to Avodah Zarah, which is in its essence metaphor at some level. So that the Micha Mocha becomes a reference to Pesel Micha, and you're supposed to be careful how you pronounce it. And we had Yisrael, this Natun Bedin at that moment, because after all, they're, Elu Velu of the Avodah Zarah, and all of those issues. So that the way the Rambam understands it, particularly in the Moreh Nevuchim, is absolutely astounding, in that he just points out that the nature of Torah as a whole, as being transitional, is learned from Beshalach, an absolutely brilliant exposition of how absurd it is for people to think that what Torah is there for is to provide you answers, where in reality, it cannot provide you answers because it is based fundamentally on your own modality of thinking and language. So how can it possibly tell you something that is impossible for you to understand? The most that it could do is to provide a structure by which you can escape those things that make it impossible for you to understand. And I wonder, what would it say? This is the only time the Rambam actually calls something sick. In modern terminology, you've used the word, this is sick. Anybody who thinks such a thing is sick. Because if you take a look at this parsha, this is one of the beautiful, beautiful rayas of the Rambam. The whole meaning of Beshalach Part What is that supposed to mean? So HaKadosh Baruch Hu is worried about, what do you mean pen? What does that mean, pen? Yes or no? I mean, isn't it something that we could just handle, These aren't the wars you're afraid of. No, these aren't the wars. Or the Plishtim, you just tell the Plishtim, these aren't the Jews you want to attack. That's right, they're not. What's the big deal? We make such a big thing. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has to change the whole nature of history, go around the other way. What happened to the Shloshet Yomim, to Har Sinai? And just imagine what all the rabbis were speaking about in their Parsha Drasha that week, what was the Parsha Drasha? They didn't yet hear the words, they just knew, they didn't know Ki Karovu, Ki Amar, that they didn't hear yet. So what was their Drasha? I don't know, it must have been something like the Jewish Observer's Drasha as to why religious Jews always look stupid on TV. So what's the Drasha? Drasha is TV is obviously an agent of the Satan, and so it makes everything Torah look stupid. That must be the point. I'm not kidding.
It was actually said?
Actually. Honestly, that's what it's. They didn't yet know that magpies looking in a mirror can figure out that they have a spot, not the mirror, that they hadn't figured out. Well, magpies maybe I'm going to have a Anyway, that's one of the most astounding, the whole parsha in the Torah about, that the ki chochmatchem uvinatchem leinei ha'amim. Amazing. Okay, but that's what they would say. They would say, you see, Kadosh Baruch Hu couldn't take us even something so chashuv to go to Eretz Yisrael, because it didn't want us to come into contact with these dirty plishtim, which teaches you that the plishtim are the lowest of the low. And that one day Palestinians will be called al Shmam. Who knows? Right? Anything. Imagine what a disappointment it would be for the drasha when the Torah is actually published. Oh, you mean it was just psychology? That's terrible. I mean, Rambam says, I said, what kind of mishigas is that? To put in the Torah the problems that God has with your psychology? I thought like the Torah is there he deals with your psychology, right? No, that's exactly the point. So that is your yesod. You see clearly from here that the Torah is given upon the layer that has been achieved in terms of your biology. Now, let's go from there. So what exactly would you like me to explain to you? Is it perhaps in the year 3000 BC to start talking about bosons? Maybe we should talk about that. Or quantum mechanics. What should I explain to you about my separation? Want to hear about the Big Bang? You know, I mean, you're not even aware of the fact that there's other planets. What am I supposed to tell you exactly? It's ridiculous. I'm not here to teach you about the nature of the universe or the nature of yourself or the discovery of your own psychology. These are things that take thousands of years. These are things that you're going to have to work through. All I'm giving you is the guidelines by which this translates into a universal vision of creation. So that if you see it in that way, and of course all the things that we end up finally really understanding are always when we make that transition. Let's get away from the way we happen to experience things and try to figure out what this means in universal sense. What would it mean if we weren't living on Earth? What would it mean if the universe had other starting situations, conditions, right? And so on. And that's the way that we grow. So every time that we discover another leap out of the little world that we live in, we discover something new about what the Torah is really saying. So, okay, so then if this is the parsha that describes the nature of transition, I don't know, maybe that's really what it's about. So then all the things that we end up talking about over here, the elements of Cherut, and the ideas of language, the nature of language, the nature of Sfeikot, to go all the way back to Gan Eden, as the Yisachar points out, that Hayesh Hashem B'Kirbeinu Imayin is the same otiyot as Hanachashi Shianis. It's the marker of the initial suffix that a consciousness other than the Borei would have of its position within creation. It's always going to be questioning its place and so on. And maybe all those issues are the things that we have to worry about. And after all, that is what Amalek, the end of the parsha, I mean, is the ultimate. It's amazing how contemporary it is, because the ultimate attack of Amalek is the attack of postmodernism. In other words, forget about the issues of metaphor and language. The question is there any nature of meaning that isn't completely solipsistic, in which you provide the context to the text, and the text could mean anything. And so then what's the point of anything? This is exactly what Amalek is raising. You happen to believe this, and we give it a completely different context. So then, I don't know, I mean, it's always like that. Take the same story, put it into a different planet, and it means something completely different. Even if you shift it by a mere 50 years or 100 years, it doesn't mean the same thing at all. So what are we talking about when it comes to meaning? So these are very, very powerful questions raised here. I don't know. Could it be that it's merely transitional to make you aware of the things that you need to deal with? Well, the problem is it can't just be simply transitional. That's for many, many reasons. When we say at the beginning of the next parsha, which of course is the Amida B'fnei Har Sinai, so we see Vayisum Refidim Vayavo Midbar Sinai. That means that whatever it is that brought us to the end of the parsha is central to the experience of Har Sinai. It means without it, there isn't any Har Sinai. In the same way that we say Makish, the Biatam Har Sinai, to the Nisiatam, the Biatam, the Hekesh goes in all directions. Those things are Hekesh domains. The fact that we learn out that was Betruva, therefore going back is Betruva, but it also goes in the opposite direction. Whatever it is that you dealt with in Refidim was also essential for the tshuva that was created at Sinai. It's not possible to separate the two. Not to mention the fact that every last aspect that is alluded to here in very strange ways. The allusions are very strange. We know that Har Sinai doesn't work out, essentially. So as the Gemara tells us, it was left with a Moda'a Rabbah Leoraita. So there was an experience of this being something that was exterior. Because of that, Klal Yisrael was always able to say, I mean, we were sort of pushed into this. We really didn't want it. It wasn't something that we understood at the time, and therefore we now can have a taina, as Rashi explains in Moda'a Rabbah. We say we shouldn't be chayav on not keeping the Torah because, I mean, we really were dragged into it. The aspects that raises, the Gemara says, all of which was true until one point in history. What was that? Kimu v'kiblu ha'Yehudim, other kiblu v'mi'ach Hashverosh. But the problem is the Kimu v'kiblu ha'Yehudim recreates all of the elements of this parsha. It's the weirdest thing. So in order to get Kimu v'kiblu ha'Yehudim, first of all, you have the first Haman here, you have the next Haman there, right? We call him Haman. But he's called Mamuchan, which Rashi says is the definition of man. It's Mukhan. Okay, so, and then how do we know that we write Esther? Because it says over here, which is a drasha that Esther makes, and sort of. So, it's these weirdest ways. We have to even know, like, the idea of how things are set up and the nature specifically of the types of questions of how we could relate something meaningful in a world which seems to be completely random, which ends up becoming the whole idea of Purim, is that it's celebrated about Purim, it's celebrated about randomness, about probability. These are the questions that were raised early on. It's obvious then that the time in between is the time that was necessary for us to make the necessary adjustments and mental growths, which were very difficult at the time of Purim, and as it says in the Megillah, right? You know, Ratzila Rov Achav. You think Purim was a pretty big day, everybody be celebrating. Well, most people liked it, you know. But that's pretty amazing. And the truth is, of course, Ad Hayom, people have the same problems with exactly the same issues. They're unable to get out of those very primitive mindsets that require exactly the things that leave us cold. And literally cold, because that's what we say. Amalek leaves you cold. Exactly the things that leave us cold here. All of the academic issues that are left absolute chilling. Nothing that involves me personally in any way. And I'm left cold by issues of randomness, carelessness, all ideas that seem to be directly connected to Amalek here, and the things that we need to understand them contextually important. So how can it be just transitional if these are precisely what we need to be thinking about in order to be able to ultimately achieve what it is that we need to achieve in the end? So it's clear that there is a very, very finely laid contextual aspect that we don't yet understand perhaps, and that means that we need to define for ourselves what is the fourth stage. Well, what are we missing? We've already reached that darga of the Cheina'am, Beini Mitzrayim, Damei Shmorcheh, Gadol Ma'od. We understand what it means to be an Am that now can stand for the first time as ratios. We have a Koach Ma'asav Yigid Li'amo for the first time. We can be actually ultimately come in on this level to Eretz Yisrael. So what's this fourth piece over here? So that it's obvious that when you take a look at Beshalach, Beshalach is what is meant to make that Sinai possible. But whatever it is that we're going to understand about it, it provides whatever we need, which isn't clear, for the Shloshet Yamim that we're meant to culminate in our Sinai, which were now transformed into Beshalach. Well, we're not going to do that. We're going to take the long way home. Okay, fine. So then obviously it means we cannot yet do what it means needed to be done in order to get there. This is the Rabbeinu Bachya. Rabbeinu Bachya points out that his lashon is like this: V'da ki kol inyanei Yisrael u'mikreihem b'midbar. Everything, you have to understand that everything that takes place in Yisrael and all of the events that take place in the Midbar, all of that was hakol haya nisayon gamur. And we'll have to understand what that means later on. In order, kedei shiyu ru'uyim lekabel haTorah, So in other words, it's clear that everything that is happening to make it possible for us to be Omed B'fnei Har Sinai. And somehow or other, these events make that possible, even though it isn't clear to us why that would be. So let's consider just some of the simple problems in the Parsha, because maybe one of them, or maybe all together, they'll prevent us from being so lost. And if we could find a common denominator, see what the issues are, it may provide a key so that we can figure out what's going on. So we have, first of all, the most striking thing, I think, probably, is the Vayaminu B'Hashem U'Moshe Avado, right? The Vayaminu B'Hashem U'Moshe Avado, I mean, it sounds like, wow, we've reached a major transition in terms of our madrega, of what it is that our belief system is. I mean, it's very strange. What exactly is new about that, first of all? I mean, certainly you're talking about Kriyat Hayam. I mean, that's basically done in every car wash. Kadosh Baruch Hu blows with the heavy, at the end when they blow the water off in the car wash, right? So he's got the water, it's got the air coming down, and it's aimed just right, and the yam splits, and I mean, big deal, I mean, that doesn't seem all that tremendously more powerful. I mean, I understand. So, the time were only an etzba, and this is a yad, but if you put all 10 etzba all together, you get 2 yads. Maybe that should be better. Okay, so, the Medrash talks about how each one of them was connected 5. You got to really work to see all of that. I mean, it certainly doesn't seem it's the darga specifically of the amazing miracle that's more miraculous than anything else that took place in Mitzrayim. I mean, it's hard to understand why that would be true. But what makes it even more problematic is that it's the one thing that the Rambam says couldn't be so. In other words, there are no madrigot between doing a little trick of dam or whatever and standing b'fnei Har Sinai. So as the Rambam says, we don't believe in Moshe Rabbeinu because of tricks. Another word for tricks is nisim. Okay, so we don't believe in these. I mean, what in the world does a trick have to do with the belief system anyway? So anyway, if that's the case, what do we believe? Only because we actually witnessed the darga of Ma'amad Har Sinai, and we saw that HaKadosh Baruch Hu spoke openly in a way that we were capable of seeing. And what's more, Moshe Rabbeinu knew this, which is why he says to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this is ridiculous. You think that was a mistake? He's absolutely right. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu knew he was right, which is why at the end, says the Rambam, he says, the only real out is the fact that when you come to this place, this mountain, you'll be Ovedet Elohim, and then they will, they will end up believing in you. So, I mean, if that takes until Yitro, so then what's this middle stage? I don't understand. What does that mean by Moshe? Where does it come into the dinim of Nevi'ut, if anything? It's the weirdest thing. The Rambam goes out of his way to make fun of any additional value that would be granted by splitting seas, right? So he says, and therefore, if a Navi comes along and he claims to be a Navi and he has the requisite knowledge, midot, personality, and so on and so forth, and he does an oath to show that he's serious. Now, he doesn't need to do any big miracles like splitting the seas. That's the weirdest thing. No, he doesn't need to split the sea. It's like he's going out of his way to say, don't think splitting a sea. I mean, he doesn't need to do anything like that. So then, so what's the point, Really very strange. I'm sure this is even worse because the Rambam says, look, splitting the sea was only there because you happened to be stuck between a rock and a hard place, and the only way to go was through the sea. It wasn't like it was meant to be anything. Well, if it wasn't meant to be anything, So why the heck did it lead to all of this writing about Beshalach? What is he saying? I thought like HaKadosh Baruch was putting on this whole big show, and then he said, no, it's actually, you're stuck over there, so, Kol HaNisim Sh'asa HaKadosh Baruch Hu Lefi HaTzorech HaZov, you need to get away from Paro, because the thing is, get him to see and drown them, it's a nice solution. That sure doesn't sound like that when you read the Psukim, right? So then it's a really, really problematic feeling that you get when you read this, like some kind of emotional high, which Badavka was the very thing that Moshe Rabbeinu didn't want. The very thing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu assured him about. That wasn't going to be the basis of anything. So what? It just took them through the next few days until they got there. If they wouldn't have had that, they wouldn't have made it. Obviously, it can't be that. Okay. Then we've got these weird early ups and downs. I understand the parsha as a whole describes basically a sine curve, But what about at the beginning where we have this, Daber b'nei Yisrael, v'yashuvu, v'yachnu lefnei piachirot, and so on. And sure enough, vayasuchem. So at the end of Pasuk Dalet, vayasuchem. What's vayasuchem? Says Rashi. Well, that teaches us. I mean, it's a crazy thing to do, isn't it? But they didn't care because since Moshe Rabbeinu had said so, they did it. Lagid Shivchan, Shishamulako Moshe. Listen, Moshe said, Lo Amru. And they didn't say, this is crazy. We're supposed to go back to the ones that are chasing us. We need to run. No, they didn't say that. Instead, El Amru, Ein Lana Divrei Ben Amram. Look, this is the guy, this is the man. So we're going to listen to him. Fine. Okay, they're going to listen to him. So here comes Paro. Wait a minute. I thought this was the man. He's only the man until you thought Paro wasn't going to come. Like, what were you thinking? It's a very strange kind of story, right? It's like, did they not? They were just talking. They didn't have any idea. And then, there's something even stranger, which is that there's like an amazing reversion here. Because remember, we are talking about a process that's been going on for a year already, right? So from the time of Rosh Hashanah, forget about Yitzhak. From the time of Rosh Hashanah, which is over 6 months ago, Pasak Avodah mi Avotenu b'Mitzrayim. We were no longer slaves. Nothing. All of a sudden, because 3 days have passed. So now, and just remember, just 3 days ago, please, could you just leave? We will kiss your feet. Just get out of here. You say you want some gold? Have more gold. You want some clothing? Take 2, right? Just pray for us. 3 days later, that's absolutely an amazing thing. 3 days later, Vayomru, Mazot asinu ki shilachot Yisrael me'ovdenu. Shilach me'ovdenu. I mean, they forgot everything that's taken place over the past 6 months. It's mashma of everything. And as Rashi says, and Achshav nefchu lirdof achrei b'shvil mamonam. What about all that money we lent them? Well, the money that you lent them, you're pouring it on them. Now it's money that you lent them because 3 days ago. Okay. Then listen to this. Yes, but that is done by them. Now, HaKadosh Baruch Hu apparently is not satisfied with all of the amazing show of the Vayachazek et Leiv Paro. Okay, how many Vayachazek et Leiv Paros have we had? We won't talk about. Okay, it's all about Vayachazek Leiv Paro. Okay, but we're going to have some extra, super duper Vayachazek et Leiv Paro. Now watch this amazing Vayachazek et Leiv Paro and V'chizakti et Leiv Paro v'radaf achareim. And that's going to be really the ikav da b'Paro v'chol chelo v'yadu Mitzrayim k'ani Hashem. Does that sound familiar a little? Sure sounds familiar to me. I remember reading those psukim like all through the entire year. So, all right. So what happens? Let's take a look. What is the Vayachazek Hashem et Leif Paro Melech Mitzrayim Vayirdof Acharei Bnei Yisrael U'Bnei Yisrael Yotzim B'Yad Ramah? What is the Vayachazek? Well, I don't know, because listen to the psukim before. Vayugad LaMelech Mitzrayim Ki Barach Ha'am Vayafech Levav Paro V'Avadav Elam V'Yumazot Asinu Ki Shilach Et Yisrael B'Avdenu. Paro runs out. Vayesor Et Richbo. Rashi says, "Hu ba'atzmo." I will not allow anybody to get my tank ready for action, man. I'm going out there myself, king or no king. I'm going to go up in front. That Amola Kachim, I'll drag everybody else with me. And then he takes massive, a call up of all the reserves. Sheish Me'od Rechav Bachur. Kol Rechav, he's got 600 tanks lined up. He's got all of his reserves called up. I mean, this is amazing, right? Vishalishim al Kulo. And at this point, he figures, but maybe we should just go out to the Luna Park together. I mean, it wouldn't be smart to chase after the Jews, right? So Rashi's, what do you mean, what Vayachazek? I mean, after he's gone crazy and he's made like the biggest statement you could possibly make, the Rashi says this crazy thing. What was the Vayachazek? So the Vayachazek Hashem was, well, he wasn't quite certain. Hayatoleh, even though, should I or shouldn't I? It's pretty late in the game. Should I or shouldn't I? So HaKadosh Baruch Hu, yes indeed, now watch this, pow! I mean, nobody would know. The last thing anybody would think was that he was going to go to a Luna Park. He was the only one who apparently Rashi is claiming thought he would go to the Luna Park. That's lunatic. So what's going on? Okay. Then later on, we have everybody's complaining about Moshe. What are we going to do? We don't have anything to drink. What do they have? It's all your fault and so on. Moshe is terrified. He says to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I can't even talk to them. Oh, Dati Skaluni, they're gonna murder me. Do something. Literally, he thinks he's going to be stoned, right? Now, the same thing happens over here. This is what we told you. We said this before. What did we say this before? Actually, we said it before because we said to you that look at what you've done. Look what you did. You gave Paro a knife to destroy us. So they're also going back 6 months. 6 months, 12 months. Same thing like the Mitzrayim. Going back to the beginning as if nothing happened. Okay, so you think that Moshe would be a little bit distraught about that. God, what am I supposed to do? What's his response to that? Exactly the same level of response HaKadosh Baruch Hu has to Paro. His response is, boys, relax. Oh, okay. Right? So what does he say to them? He says to them, listen, it's not a big deal, calm down, everything's going to be fine. And, hityatzvu, al tiro, ru'et yishuat Hashem asher yaseh lachem hayom. And everybody's fine, just be quiet at the Rishon, calm down. You can imagine him saying that a little later on when he's saying they're gonna stone me. Then I goes Robert say, just tell him calm down, wave, everything's gonna be fine. How did this whole first part? It doesn't really make any much sense. I mean, based on the understanding of what's going on later on. So we don't understand the Vechazek, we don't understand the Aminu, we don't understand the changes from the Ein Lan or Ela Ben Amram. Then we come to the end. And I'm telling you, I mean, the Rambam's got us completely confused. How do you read this? How do you read the story at the end? So, now look at the words in the pasuk. There's two key words that become central in the story of Amalek. Vayarev ha'am Moshe. So they're fighting, right? This all the way. This is Shvi. They're near the beginning of Shvi. So Vayarev ha'am Moshe. Vayomu tnu lanu mayim v'nishteh. And then Vayomer Moshe, Materivuni Madi, why are you fighting with me? Mati nasun et Hashem. Why are you testing the Lord? Tenasu Hashem. What is that supposed to mean? So Rashi's Matanas Hashem, and it's basically a takeoff on that whole parak in Tehillim, which also, it sounds a little bit hilarious. Like, I mean, people are a little strange. I mean, you read these psukim and these guys are crazy. So here we have this whole massive Tehillah about these amazing things that happened in Mitzrayim, and what happened to our forefathers? So Baka Yam Vayigavirein, Vayitzav Mayim Kmoneim, Vayanchem Ba'anan Yomam, V'chol Halayla Ba'or Eish, and his Bokeh Tzurim, Vayash Getomot Rabbah, Vayatzei Noslim Misela. Again, Vayanu Su'el Bilvavam, Vayidabru Belim Lemor. Maybe he can't set the table. Maybe I want to do, but I mean, could he really provide us? I mean, like, this is really so massively different. This is like your problem, right? Can he really give that? Yeah, it's true. Yeah, okay, a little trick, the water gushes out of a stone. I understand. But meat? Get us meat? I don't know about that. Elohim, Vayam Teraleim, it's the gun Shamayim Natan Lamo, each Sida Shalach Lem Lasova. Like, what are these guys thinking exactly? Okay, but whatever, isn't that what it sounds like? Matan Asun, so Rashi says, Loma, how you chala take Mayim Be'eretz Tziyah is basically like quoting the ideas in this curriculum, right? It's all about, Dor Sorero Moreh, and they have no emunah, no bitachon. Now, the amazing thing is, when you read the Rambam, you don't even know what is he talking about. I say this is code words, because in the end, Vayikra Shem HaMakom, Masa Umeriva. These two words are so central that the actual name of the place ends up being called after these two words. Masa Umeriva. Why those words? Al Riv B'nei Yisrael, V'amnot Sotam Et Hashem Lemar Yesh Hashem B'kirbeinu Imai. So there were two things. There was the Riv. The Riv apparently is with Moshe. And then there was the fact that they were being menased et Hashem. Yesh Hashem B'kirbeinu Imai. Now, this turns into an Isser later on. Lo tenasu et Hashem ka'asher nisito b'marad. So this is the story of Marad. So you're not supposed to be minaset Hashem. Gemara uses that as the actual source text in which, okay, that was the cute story we talked about. I don't want to, but the child of Rish Lakish, in which he said, "How do I know that Aser b'chtei shetaser?" So he says, "Well, try it." So the boy says, "Well, you're not allowed to try it. Doesn't it say lo tenasu et Hashem?" So yeah, obviously understands to mean don't challenge God to see whether he can do something, right? So Rabbi Yochanan says to him, "No, but in this you can, because it says beferish bechanudina bazot." So test me. So test me. That apparently is on not Satamat Hashem. All of that goes straight down the tubes as far as the Rambam is concerned, because the Rambam says, "No, I'll tell you what." And he lists this as one of the Tayyag mitzvahs. It's not a small thing. The Rambam, the main work that the Rambam did before even beginning Mishnah Torah was to take every mitzvah to define it precisely. What is the mitzvah? And by defining it precisely, he could then structure Mishnah Torah to be able to put each Mishnah to its place. Okay. So the Lo Tenasu et Hashem. So where does that fit in exactly? When you pass me the Rambam from behind you, please. This is the last halacha in Hilchot Yesodei Torah. So we'll get back to this halacha and see how it defines so much. But first, let's just take the simple meaning of the mitzvah as he's explaining it over here. Navi she'id lo navi, acher shu navi. So you don't necessarily have to prove that you are a navi because if another navi, let's say Moshe, said that Yehoshua is a navi, right? So then you don't have to prove anything. Moshe Rabbeinu he'id leYehoshua, ve'eminu bo kol Yisrael kodem she'aseh od. V'chein ledorot. So wherever Navi Shinon Da'an Nevuato ve'eminu b'dvorav, however long it takes, 3 odiot Rama Prabha Moshe he'id lo Navi, and this person fits all the qualifications. So Alech b'darchei nevuah. You can't start wondering whether his neviut is emet or not. Shema eina emet. You can't keep challenging him to prove that he is a navi. You can't just keep saying every time you want something. Yesh Hashem b'kirbeinu yimayim. Yesh Hashem b'kirbeinu yimayim. They were saying, does he know how to set the table properly in the minbar? They weren't saying anything about the Nevi'ut. What happened? How does he get any of that? It just like doesn't seem to be there. And yet here we are in a parsha that is actually discussing the questions of elements of Nevi'ut, right? Because remember that one of the most striking things that happens at the Yam is that even the simplest person was able to see Marot on the Yam that even the great Nevi'im later on, Yechezkel ben Buzi, and he saw the Merkava and he described the Merkava and so on. But he didn't see even what a Shivcha, a simple maid, saw on the Yam. I don't know, that is a little bit weird, because why is that important? Since anyway, we don't seem to utilize that as proof of Nevi'ut, because we still need to come to Har Sinai, as the Rambam says, what indeed was the makar of our belief in Moshe Rabbeinu was only one thing, and that was b'ma'amid Har Sinai. שאיננו ראו ולא זר, אוזנינו שמעו ולא אחרת. We heard הכל מדבר אליו ואנו שומעים. משה, משה, לחם עולם כך וכך. וכן הוא אומר, פנים בפנים דיבר השם עמכם. ונאמר לו את אבותינו קראת השם את הברית הזאת. And how do we know? I can prove to you. It's a בפירוש הפוסק that it's only מעמד הר סיני. הוא לבדו הראיה לנבואתו של אמת. שנאמר, הנה אנוכי בא אליך באב הענן, בעבור ישמע העם מדברים בה, וגם בך יאמינו לעולם. This just a few short pages after V'aminu b'Hashem u'b'Moshe Avdo, with all of this grand element of Nevi'ut. So what? It makes the problem even more acute. Well, what's the point? To turn it into something that has to do with Nevi'ut. How did Lo Tanasu have to do with Nevi'ut? Now, of course, this all is very much part of the Rambam's entire interpretation of Yetziat Mitzrayim, as we learned before in Hilchot Avodat Kochavim. But the solution to the problems of Mitzrayim, I'll bet you thought it had to do with like miracles and taking us out of Egypt and so on. But the Rambam doesn't think it has anything to do with that. When we got to a point, we were up to the Chamishim Sharei Tuma. What did HaKadosh Baruch Hu do? Asa Moshe Rabbeinu Rabban Shel Kol HaNevi'im V'Shalcha. And what did he do? Nothing. Doesn't discuss anything. It was the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu was Rabban Shel Kol HaNevi'im. Like this has been our theme. We've been talking about this throughout this parsha. Now all of a sudden we get to the end, right as we're about to transition here. We're just at the segue between Beshalach and Yitro, which is between the Yam, Amalek on the one hand, and the coming in front of our Sinai on the end. And what are we talking about? Believe it or not, exactly that, at least for the Rambam. Exactly that is the basis of the Emunah and Moshe Rabbeinu. How it is that the meeting with Amalek somehow is the Riv with Moshe Rabbeinu, translates into the Nisayon of Hashem in terms of the Neviut of Moshe, which it doesn't say. And that requires our Sinai ultimately to address it. Very soon, if you do get more Sinai. So, I mean, it's like a parsha that leaves us just hanging. All of its main elements don't really make sense. And yet, Shvi Shel Pesach, which, of course, this is what happens. Shvi Shel Pesach, the Zohar says this is a process. The Tzia is a process. I mean, in the same way that you have dinim of tuna, we require Shivas Mekiyim, you need Sefira, in order to be able to be Yotzei from tuna to Tyra. The process of leaving Mitzrayim required those 7 days. The fact that we have a new Yontif on Shvi Shel Pesach, and yet, is it truly a new Yontif? Do we say a Hallel? No, just we come on minhag. That's why we don't say Hallel Shalom. Do we have a special korban? No, that's why we don't say that. So what is exactly Shvi Shel Pesach? So clearly the idea of Shvi Shel Pesach is just now a retrospective of what happened before. There's nothing new, but somehow it allows you to see it in a way that for the first time is functional for you. It was all there, nothing new happens, but apparently the events here in the Shalach are the first time that you understand this. You didn't need any of this in terms of the Yitzhak. To such an extent, you didn't need any of it. I remember Moshe Rabbeinu was told, make sure that they all know that they have to get that money before they leave. Because otherwise, Avram Avinu is going to say that Abadun Vinu Otam Kiyem Bam, but then Achrechem Yatzur Rechush Gadol Lo Kiyem Bam. Moshe Rabbeinu should have said, just wait a couple days, they're going to come to the Yam. Gadol, Midas Hayam, much Gadol. They're going to bring all of their treasures like the Goyim do. Why do we got to dray everybody a cup over here to tell them? By the time Pesach is over, they'll be multi-millionaires. What do you have to go through this rigmarole of asking for, lend me this, lend me that, and then they go, who needs this? No, this has got to be done in Mitzrayim. So what is all the rest of it? The rest is just purely gratuitous. We want to add a tip. All got gratuities, We add a tip now, as if it wasn't enough. Again, every place you look, the things that are happening seem to be blown way out of proportion there. Because Baruch is like restating the whole issue. Mitzrayim is restating the whole issue. Yisrael is restating the issue. We told you so. Back in the beginning. How in the world is that reliving those moments now being twisted by some minor thing, which is just, Moshe Rabbeinu saying, calm down, that was a big deal, or HaKadosh Baruch Hu making this major chizuk alev, which nobody even noticed. I was already made it very clear before, and some additional notch of a new emunah in all the things that we saw before anyway. And this is supposed to be that which changes the entirety of the incident. So clearly we are missing something very, very important about the meaning of the Shalom. What it is that it provides for us that changes everything forever. It makes, as Rabbi Barka says, it makes the coming in front of our Sinai possible. So that, after we go to Tfilat Arbit, Ezrat Hashem, we shall return and be with you in all your ships at sea. Come back, don't forget us, and we'll be back about 9.